are talking 1974, La Posesión del Altair, also known as 1974, The Possession of Altair, and this is a Mexican found footage movie that is directed and written by Victor Dreyer. Now, this is a movie which is clearly set in 1974 with, you know, early kind of cameras, and it was actually shot primarily on a real kind of Super 8 camera to give it this kind of, you know, authentic 74 feel. You could kind of watch this in a double feature, I feel, with the movie Antrim and make a kind of, you know, retro 70s throwback kind of double bill. So this is kind of like a possession movie in the style of found footage, but filmed as it was made in kind of obviously the 70s. And I've got to say, it does a very good job. What's the story? Well, it focuses on this newly married couple who start experiencing strange phenomena, first of all. You know, birds kind of flying into the house, etc., etc. The wife is clearly the target of these kind of supernatural forces, and she thinks she's kind of seeing angels in her dreams that are wanting to, her to go with her and all that sort of stuff. And she starts to act stranger and stranger as the film progresses, when it clearly gets very paranormal and very kind of dangerous for everyone to be there. The husband kind of recruits the wife's sister, his friend, to try and kind of help what's going on, but what will happen? Well, you will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works. So first of all, foremost, this is a found footage movie, but it is filmed like it was made in the 70s. Now, it's actually a 2016 movie, but it does a very good job, I think, of portraying an authentic 70s film. So as I've mentioned, this was actually primarily filmed on a Super 8 camera that gives it that genuine kind of feel. But it's not just that. I feel that there's a good job done here with things like hair and makeup, and the costuming, props and things like that. So it does have that sort of genuine kind of 70s kind of aesthetic in a lot of ways. And obviously this kind of gives the film some kind of leeway into having sort of, you know, when it incorporates special effects, because the film is grainy, because the film is, you know, not particularly kind of sharp and things like that, because obviously it's meant to be a 70s film. You know, you can kind of get away with some of the kind of the more VFX kind of style shots here, because it kind of hides it a little bit in the kind of the you know, the not so crisp picture that you would have got from a 1970 kind of 8mm kind of camera. So in that area as well, it kind of has that extra advantage. Now, this is a Spanish language movie. It's filmed in Mexico, but I've got to say, I do think the acting was pretty strong here from the cast. You know, everyone does a pretty good job. I feel you kind of somewhat get to know the characters. You know, the husband and wife, the kind of the friend who is kind of somewhat the comedy relief and things like this. So I feel you get a reasonable idea here of the cameras. The film kind of sets up its kind of mythology, giving you some kind of backstory as to pointing to maybe this has been kind of something which has been on the cards for quite a while. So there's kind of an interesting kind of you know, setup to this, and I think the supernatural stuff is kind of handled kind of reasonably well as well. Story-wise, it isn't anything particularly new, I will say, but it kind of goes on, and the threat kind of escalates as the film progresses. Kind of the stakes becoming more and more kind of dangerous and unpredictable as the film goes on, and it does kind of end in quite the crescendo. I must kind of say. So overall, I have to say it's genuinely pretty good. Do I have any issues with this movie? I have to say, I do think the concept of a found footage movie filmed in 1974, I feel is a little bit hard to believe. I mean, we have to bear in mind the technology then. Would people be filming themselves, things like having breakfast? Because you've got to bear in mind the time there. I mean, I was actually born in 1974. You know, in this kind of era, you would have to kind of take film to get developed, etc. You know, you wouldn't be filming stuff on a whim. Do you know what I mean? Because you simply, it would be too expensive. It would be a waste of film. So the concept of a found footage movie taking place in 1974 is a little bit harder to swallow than I think a found footage movie taking place in these days where everyone can record stuff on their phone. You know, had it, obviously we're talking, the thing is with found footage movies, I suppose, is you have to have that degree of, you know, you're buying into the kind of the footage that you're seeing. And although I think the footage that you do see on screen is engaging and well filmed, the concept of it being filmed in the 70s is a little bit hard to kind of follow. I mean, you would get maybe people would film the weirder stuff, but it's obviously the kind of the more mundane stuff that kind of builds the characters and things like this that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like there'd be any real reasons for someone to be filming this at that kind of period in time. I think the movie also kind of cheats a little bit because it has like musical swells and things like this. And if you're having a, it's not a full-on soundtrack, but there are musical cues here. And with a found footage movie, when you have this, I think it kind of undercuts the whole point of a found footage movie. You know, where you're, you know, you kind of pretend you're watching kind of real footage, and when you add things like music into it, it kind of takes it away. Yes, it makes it kind of more cinematic. So both of the fact that this is a found footage movie that takes place in the kind of the 1974, and it has these musical swells, I think it makes for a more cinematic experience. But you can't buy into the concept as much that it's obviously a you know, genuine footage, which we know it isn't. But you just kind of like to have that kind of like you know, the suspension of disbelief for a certain amount of time. Now, despite the fact that this movie's does have this kind of fuzzy kind of veneer to it, there are still occasions where I feel that kind of the digital effects, you can kind of still tell they're digital effects. So it's, you know, obviously had this been a modern found footage movie, they would stick out a lot more. The film with its kind of like grainy aesthetic hides some of it, but not everything. So there is still that. And ultimately, I've got to say, it's not a particularly original story in any way. Some aspects here, for example, I like the fact that they actually suggest watching The Exorcist to try and get ideas about how to deal with its potential possession. I thought was quite fun. But there are, outside of a few kind of like bells and whistles, ultimately it's kind of somewhat of a similar kind of possession movie that you have seen before outside of its presentation, which I think is maybe the thing that makes this unique, but also causes some potential kind of issues here. I think maybe some people may be put off by the kind of the rough and ready kind of 70s aesthetic. I feel people of a certain age who maybe used to these kind of films may enjoy that kind of like that retro kind of feel, but I think younger people may be put off by the kind of the graininess, the kind of the old style kind of aesthetic here. Obviously probably not used to watching kind of films like this, but you know, this is more of a kind of a personal type thing. Overall, I do think this is a good found footage movie. It does actually have some genuinely kind of creepy moments, some kind of quite kind of shocking kind of elements, and there are some scary kind of sequences here. And like I said, I do think the 70s kind of packaging here is both a positive and a little bit of a drawback in some respects. I think partially this depends on how much you can kind of look past that in a certain degree. You know, having more of a critical mind where I'm having to review films a bit more often, I kind of am maybe more aware of that than maybe some. But overall, it is an above average found footage movie. I will give this a 6 out of 10, but I don't think it necessarily is necessarily groundbreaking. I think some of the aesthetics that it has also is a drawback. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.